So, I just finished recording a little snippet, a little video thing, which I intend to give a provocative title, because I like provocative titles. Probably call it Mask Off. So if it's a different name, I will specify in the description. But as you might know, there's been a period of me not being present, a period of me stopping this little project I had in order to do other things in my life. However, it's always been niggling at the back of my mind, this little fear, or this little, not fear, this little disappointment at when I stopped, because this very chapter, Surah, or chapter as I like to call them, is titled in my edition, The Poets. And to me that is, just to give a little bit of a background, to me describing, thinking of the Qur'an as poetry, as philosophy, that's what defends it. That's what makes it not scary. The problem, I think, is when religion is taken to be literal truth, but also something that is not worth interpreting anymore, not worth thinking about anymore, not worth building upon and improving upon. I think that when we think about it as poetry and philosophy, that's when all of the value in it comes out. And when we think of it as literal truth, the literal word of God, that's when people stop going like, well, maybe God was trying to communicate something a little bit more subtle. Maybe the prophet was making a great big progress compared to the other people of the era, while still not necessarily being the model of how we should live our lives. For instance, actually, since I mentioned it, or I mentioned it in my little welcome back video, the mask off video, this idea of sharing, of inheritance of women. It specifies that, again, I wish I remembered which chapter it was. I'm expecting it's in the women chapter, which is 4, my most viewed video. But it sort of describes this idea of women having the equivalent, like a daughter gets half the inheritance of a son, a niece half the inheritance of a nephew, and so on. And this, like, obviously to me is very sexist compared to like what I'm living in this society, where we expect and encourage people of any gender to be productive members of society, and the best way of doing that is to make them legally equal. So, however, knowing what I know, both from the context clues that are specified, like the footnotes in this book, maybe even some reading outside of this, I know that the context of this was the sexism of the society that this was being preached to was much, much worse. And so clearly, going from, I believe the story was, like, one of the footnotes mentions these daughters of God, and this being a euphemism for these daughters that were left out to die in the desert. And if this is the society you're preaching to, preaching that in fact a woman should be allowed to inherit anything, is an enormous leap forward. But that doesn't mean we get to stop there. We learn from what the point was here. It wasn't for the prophet to come down and say, well, now we're going to go from this most basic understanding to the most perfect understanding that we will never need to improve upon ever. There's this yawning gap between these two positions. So I think that when you read it as poetry and philosophy, it's very easy to see that actually we can still progress beyond this. We can go, well, as a philosophical text, what the prophet was saying was, as a philosopher, he was saying, we need to respect women's rights to engage in our societies, rather than this meaning that women should always earn less than men. Maybe it means that women should earn as men earn. And the Prophet, instead of simply was making the right step in the right way, he was showing us the way, pointing the direction by stepping towards the light, not necessarily managing to lead us all there in one go, actually just making progress. So keeping this in mind, this is sort of my pre-bunk of this, is the idea of it being poetry is to me the best defense for all of my poetry and philosophy. It's the best defense of every criticism I've ever had of any religion. If you just say, well, it's poetic, it's philosophical, then you're right. It is poetic, it is philosophical. I can't argue. It's probably even good. But if you say, this is what they did, so this is what we forever shall do, then it's kind of like a child being taught that murder is wrong, then deciding that they can't defend themselves. Right? We have to actually learn that in the different contexts, different understandings, progress beyond. We took the right steps in the right direction. That's what philosophy is all about. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe here we have the definite proof that it is not supposed to be poetry and it cannot be seen as poetry. But indeed, let's read the introduction. A Meccan surah, which takes its name from the reference to poets in verse 224. It talks about the disbelievers who belittle the Qur'an and gives examples of God's power and grace in his creation. It recounts several stories of earlier prophets, the reactions of their people, and punishments that afflicted them. Oh good, more of that. Ending by confirming the divine origin of the Qur'an. It is not something brought down by the jinn, nor is it poetry, and the Prophet is not a poet. Well, truth by assertion, as usual. Actually, just reading that introduction, I'm like, oh, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's just boring. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe my ideas of why I stopped are wrong, and actually I was just not interested anymore. But because it recounts several stories of earlier prophets. Yeah, we've read those before. The reactions of their people, I remember those as well, and the punishments that afflicted them. And it's like, yes, and none of this does anything for anyone. It's just like, woe be unto you, because if you don't accept that I'm right, then you're gonna be sorry. It's like my mother used to tell me, oh, when you are older, you're gonna realize how stupid you are now. And it's like, that's the dumbest thing you could possibly tell to anyone. That's obviously not convincing to anyone. It's obviously only reassuring to the people who already believe. It's a comfort to those who have already joined your team. As we usually do, we're going to keep the Clear Quran, which is the one I've been told is the best translation, and I'm also going to include one other, which is this one. The problem with just using this one is that I find that the online version of this translation is incorrect. It doesn't actually transliterate what's being written in this book. It sort of, maybe there were some misspellings and some grammar stuff and some wrong words, which when I checked in the book were just not what was written there. So I like having it there because that means I can check and sort of compare, and I know I've read the introduction to this book, so I kind of know the context and how he uses language. So it's useful for me to check, but it's not as good as I wanted it to be. And I'm not just gonna sit here with like a book in my hand and read it out loud. You need to be able to see what I'm reading as well. Otherwise, like, it's a video. If I just wanted to do a podcast, I'd do that. So Tarsin Mim, TSM. A good league team, I think. I haven't watched League in a while. These are the verses of the clear book. Prophet, are you going to worry yourself to death because they will not believe? If we had wished, we could have sent them down a sign from heaven at which their necks would stay bowed in utter humility. And why don't you? Whenever they are brought a new revelation from the Lord of Mercy, they turn away, which kind of contradicts itself, right? Like if God wanted to, he could have given us absolute proof. But whenever God brings any kind of revelation, they bow their heads away. So clearly, God is either exaggerating his own skill, or for some reason he doesn't actually want to give us clear proof. Which is interesting. I think it's a valuable idea that actually you're not supposed to know. It's supposed to be a little bit nebulous. It's supposed to be a little bit unclear. Going back to the whole idea of progress thing, I think it might be actually useful, because whenever anyone says, this is what God tells you to do, then they go, well, then they stop thinking. It's like, well, I guess I don't have to think about this anymore because God has just done all the thinking for me. So maybe it is useful and important that we don't actually know for certain that this is what God wants from us. We have to take the last step ourselves. The reason is the last step. We can get instruction, but then we get our homework, and then we do the homework. And I feel like it's not just me who hasn't read it, it's also people who have read it who have not actually read the homework, or have actually done the homework. They've read the homework, they read the homework out loud, they memorize the homework, and they don't actually do the problems. Like getting a long list of math equations and just saying, well, x cubed is equal to 16. What does that mean? Well, nobody knows. Like what the answer is x equals 2. You actually do the last step. You don't just give up. Also, continuing with my many, many awful addictions. But yes, let's keep going. They deny it, but the truth of what they scorned will soon hit them. Of course it will. Do they not see the earth and what noble things we grow in it? God is nature? There truly is a sign in this, though most of them do not believe. I mean, if the sign is that nature, like, the noble kinds of things we grow in it is a sign, isn't the ignoble things also a sign then? If the noble things are a sign of the nobility of God and the grace of God, is not the ignoble, the evil of nature a sign of the evil? These arguments have to go both ways. Your Lord alone is the Almighty, the Merciful. Your Lord called to Moses, go to those wrongdoers, the people of Pharaoh, will they not take heed? The downside of an excessive amount of fizzy drink consumption. Moses said, my Lord, I fear they will call me a liar. Good. And I will feel stressed and tongue-tied. So send Aaron too. Well, good. It's a little bit of performance anxiety. This is actually what I like more about the Quran than the Bible. Is the characters seem much more human. The characters in the Bible are like they're nobody's like that. Nobody communicates like that. And nobody is, it's like almost these Shakespearean characters walking around, woe unto thee. Like if you imagine Hamlet, like, to be or not to be. I generally doubt that he actually, or obviously it's not a real character, but if there ever was a person thinking about the sort of their own mortality like that, I very much doubt that they would say to be or not to be. They'd be much more crass and crude and basic. But here you have this sort of almost crass and crude. Like I'm afraid they'll call me a liar. Like, not just wrong, they'll call me a liar, and this will make me distressed. I am a human being. This is one of the pretty things of this. A lot of poetry of this is the humanizing aspect. You see an insight into what it means to be a man. Besides, they have charge against me, and I fear they may kill me. God said, no, they will not. Go both of you with our signs, we shall be with you listening. Go both of you to Pharaoh and say, we bring a message from the Lord of the worlds. Let the children of Israel leave with us. It's, okay, this one, because of movies, let my people go. That's like, we've perfected the poetry here. Let my people go. Many thousands of years of practice. That's the way you say it. Let my people go. Pharaoh said, "Did we not bring you up as a child among us? Did you not stay with us for many years? And then you committed that crime of yours? You were so ungrateful." Moses replied, "I was misguided when I did it." The crime? No, that was, he killed a slaver. Like, I think that was a good thing. And I fled from you in fear. Later my Lord gave me wisdom and made me one of his messengers. And is this that you have enslaved the children of Israel, the favor with which you reproach me? And is this that you have enslaved the favor with which you... Oh, I see. Yeah, now I understand. Sorry. The kindness the Pharaoh is talking about is slavery, right? It's very very typical as well. You read if you read some of the slavers in the U.S. before the Civil War, and even before like their own independence, you hear them sort of talk about, actually, we're doing a kindness to these uncivilized savages, right? This seems to be what Pharaoh is implying here. It's like, actually, I was so nice to you. I just took you in, and then I made you work for me, because obviously you have to work for me, right? It makes sense, right? This sort of self-delusion, which is, by the way, this is also good poetry. You're showing how to do critical thinking by telling a story, right? How do you critically think? Somebody who talks about how kind they are, and you sort of reframe what they're saying. They're saying, well, I took you in. You mean enslaved me? Right? This is a good critical thinking tool. Good as poetry. Pharaoh asked, "What is this Lord of Worlds?" Completely ignoring the argument, which is also good wisdom for dealing with rhetoric. Moses replied, "He is the Lord of heavens and earth and everything between them. If you would only have faith." I think, if you would only have faith. I can understand where you're coming from, but it's... why? Why should we have faith? What does it help us be moral? Can you not appeal to our own morality like you did earlier? That you have enslaved the children. Like, you can appeal to reason. You don't need to appeal to faith. I think actually a good insight here, because I've started phrasing it as people have created God in their own image more so than have been created in his image. People sort of impose their own biases and bigotries upon God and sort of vindicate themselves instead of reflecting critically on their own problems. And so I think faith like this, like, I understand, like, it does kind of contradict what I said earlier, where I was stressing that actually maybe it's a good thing that we don't have certain knowledge, and you need a little bit of faith to make that extra leap. But I think we can use reason to understand things. Like, people usually do. It's not usually that people's theology informs their morality. It's usually the other way around. People's morality informs their theology. Our conception of God. Like, if you ask someone who's grown up in Norway, like, what their conception of God is, it usually corresponds quite well to the moral values they have in their society. Whereas somebody completely different, maybe somebody in China, will say, well, I think they're much more atheistic, but like, they might say something like, well, the order of society, and like, it's not so much about the freedom and the individualism of the Western cultures, it's more of the sort of collectivist good. And so we impose our moral values onto God. And that shows to me that we've started by using reason, by starting by doing philosophy, by engaging with these ideas, and then we deduce who God is based on our ability to do reason. So just having faith is actually not the best way. That said, Moses did say he was going to be stressed and tongue-tied, so we shall cut him some slack. He probably wasn't being as reflective as is most useful. And to be fair, Pharaoh did like completely ignore the legitimate criticism. So it is fair that he's like, Pharaoh is clearly more trained in rhetoric than our poor Moses. Pharaoh said to those present, "Do you hear what he says?" Moses said, "He is your Lord and the Lord of your forefathers." Pharaoh said, "This messenger who has been sent to you is truly possessed." I'm saying Pharaoh is good at rhetoric. He's not good at rhetoric. He's just slightly better than Moses. Because this is, I guess maybe this is good rhetoric because it does convince a lot of, it's good sophistry at least. And if you know how I feel about sophistry and philosophy in general, you might know that that's not a good word. Moses continued, "Lord of the east and west and everything between them. If only you would use your reason now. That's much better, but we haven't actually gotten so much of the reason. We've only gotten the one thing and then several appeals, several statements like, he is God, why won't you use your reason?" However, maybe what we can interpret here is that Moses is bemoaning the fact that Pharaoh isn't engaging with him. Like I would, like if I was having an argument with a flat earther and they just kept insulting me, which has happened, you would get to a point where it's like, why won't you actually engage with what I'm trying to say? Essentially how we phrase this in modern terms, Moses is complaining that Pharaoh is being bad faith. I think also this is a good thing to do if somebody wants to do it. I'm probably not going to be the one, but modernizing this language, like to an absurd extent, like genuinely like slang terms, modernizing it is something that's very useful. I think that making religion more living often requires us to revise how we use language, because language is living and the way we use words changes. One of my favorite examples of this, because the word retard has been used, is described as a slur at this point, which I find very weird because we have already done this once before, where we take the word for someone, which means like someone who is mentally challenged, somebody who has a genuine affliction, and changes it so that it means just a stupid person. And that word is idiot. Idiot used to mean specifically people with mental disabilities. And now it doesn't. Now it just means stupid person. So this is what we're going to continue to do. So if you make it into a slur, it's like, well, okay, we're just going to start using the other word. I've heard sometimes people use the word neurodivergent to mean idiot. And it's like, that doesn't solve it. Now eventually we're going to have two N-words. That was a wonderful digression. Let's go back. If you would only use your reason. But Pharaoh said to him, "If you take any god other than me, I will throw you into prison." Well, I guess there's no arguing with a tyrant. And Moses asked, "Even if I show you something convincing?" Ooh, now we're talking. I'm excited. "Show it then," said Pharaoh, "if you are telling the truth." So Moses threw down his staff, and lo and behold, it became a snake for everyone to see. Very good. Someone do that to me next time. I want to see the snake. Give me a convincing sign. Make my microphone into a snake. It would be very amusing. Because we're in Norway, the snakes aren't very poisonous. So I'm willing to make that challenge. Then he drew out his hand, and lo and behold, it was white for the onlookers to see. He drew out his hand out of his collar, shining white. I mean, this isn't surprising to me because, as you can tell, I'm way ahead of you. Pharaoh said to the counselors around him, "This man is a learned sorcerer." Indeed. If somebody tells me this story, that's the assumption you make. Like, why would you assume anything else? Like, I have to trust eyewitness testimony? Do you know how stupid witnesses are? They get rushed off with all kinds of crazy delusions. So, yeah. Tell me that story about somebody doing something impossible. I assume they've probably done something possible but clever. We've seen magicians before. It seems like they do things that are impossible, and it turns out it's just a trick. So it's a reasonable thing, and more reasonable also, especially for us reading this, is it's not evidence. He means to use his sorcery to drive you out of your land. What do you suggest? Wow, actually, Pharaoh was a good politician, really good at stoking fear. They answered, "Delay him and his brother for a while, and send messengers to all the cities to bring every accomplished sorcerer to you." Also a good trick to, or a good system. Like, can we replicate this? Like, well, it seems like you did something impossible. Does that mean that God came down and helped you? Or does that mean that we just don't understand what reality is? So imagine like you were transported back in time, and you know things like, maybe you know how gunpowder is made, you know how to make the nitrate compounds, which I believe you can make through potash and bat guano. Not exactly sure, but like you can make. There are ways to like make gunpowder, obviously, and like you could go back in time and learn this trick. And if you showed this trick to somebody long before gunpowder was anywhere near, you would seem like this great sorcerer. You could do magic tricks. You could make things explode. You can make cast fire from your fingers. And indeed, if you then went around saying, "Well, actually, I can do this because God has chosen me specifically," then it would be reasonable to try and disprove this by emulating it. See if we can do the same trick. The sorcerers were to be assembled at the appointed time on a certain day, and the people were asked, "Are you all coming? We may follow the sorcerers if they win." When the sorcerers came, they said to Pharaoh, "Shall we be rewarded if we win?" And he said, "Yes, and you will join my inner court." Moses said to them, "Throw down whatever you will. Throw it down." Oh, that's like a good diss track. Throw down whenever you want to throw down. Very cool. They threw their ropes and staffs, saying, "By Pharaoh's might we shall be victorious." But Moses threw his staff, and lo and behold, it swallowed up their trickery. And the sorcerers fell down on their knees, exclaiming, "We believe in the Lord of worlds, the Lord of Moses and Aaron." Okay? Pharaoh said, "How dare you believe in him before I had given you permission?" I mean, to be fair though, like, if you were doing this test, you would then be, to a certain extent, you would be beholden. You would, like, if we're thinking about this like scientifically, you're doing this test and you're throwing, like, you're doing this experiment essentially, and the consequence of this experiment is, oh my god, this, I didn't expect this to happen. I thought my staffs and ropes and like our snake tricks was the same trick, and it turns out it's not the same trick. It's something else. It's something I did not know how to do. But you don't, if you immediately jump to the conclusion that, well, that means that everything else they're saying must be true, it's not exactly good critical thinking, right? There are tricks and other ways of doing things. But yeah, to be fair. So to be fair to the Pharaoh, despite the fact that we have no love lost for slavers and tyrants, yeah, he must be the master who taught you sorcery. Also, not an unreasonable position for a pharaoh to believe. Like, all the evidence he has is all of these sorcerers he is summoned from out of town, doing a bad trick, and then immediately going, "Oh, you must be telling all of the truth." Like, if you seem too willing to believe, then, like, for instance, I was told that one of the reasons why Muslims might seek out my channel, despite it being called an Islamophobe, or the series being called an Islamophobe reads the Quran, is that actually maybe is that there's like a type of content where extremely aggressive haters of Islam become converts, and like, to me, that's like, the only way for that to be convincing or even reassuring, if you're already a believer, you have to actually go in as hard as physically possible. You can't just go the first evidence and you go, "Oh, actually that means it's true." Actually, it does remind me of something where you can flip it around. So when I was in a philosophy class at high school, one of the things we were asked to do at a certain point was try and defend the opposite, because this was the point I was very anti-religious already. Like, I'd read The God Delusion very excessively, and me and my friend were very openly discussing this, and so our position was, we were told by our teacher, try and argue the opposite point, like try and do the best opposite position. And so we did that. And the thing was, I feel like, I don't remember very well, but I feel like we managed to give arguments that none of the students would contradict, but the teacher actually had a very many good criticisms of our arguments. And the thing happened was, as soon as he gave a criticism, I collapsed. I like, no, you're right. I don't have any, I'm not sure that this argument is convincing. And when you do that, it isn't very good proof of atheism, right? It's not convincing that actually, it doesn't seem like we made our best effort. So to make, in a similar way here for Pharaoh, it probably doesn't seem like they made the best effort in trying to disprove Moses when they immediately swapped sides as soon as they couldn't explain it. As soon as it was like, oh, I'm a little bit unsure. No, it has to be God, right? It does seem quite suspicious. Soon you will see. I will cut off your alternate hands and feet, then crucify the lot of you. Not sure they did. Well, maybe they did. I haven't looked into it. Crucifixion in ancient Egypt, not well aware of. I do like this because this is also I read afterwards. This was a Roman punishment as well, the cutting off of alternate hands and feet, and it does feel like the idea of being like lopsided does feel strange. So yes, that will do us no harm, they said, for we are sure to return to our Lord. Well, I mean, well, I can tell you right now that is technically incorrect. It will do them quite a lot of harm, but obviously their point being is they're willing to die, they're willing to suffer for their faith, and just the fact that, for me, the hilarity of going, I will cut off your alternate hands and feet and crucify the lot of you, and them saying that will do us no harm. Crucifixion is a slow way to die, buddy. It's like it will definitely do you some harm. Also, actually, cutting off your alternate hands and feet and then crucifying, like, part of, obviously you do it through the wrist and not the hand, but like it's easier to crucify someone if you don't cut off their hands and feet. So I feel like this is just a wasted step. You can just skip to the crucifixion. I guess it doesn't sound as brutal when you just say crucify. It doesn't have the emotional appeal to us. If you've never seen a crucifixion, you might not actually engage with the idea that it is a horrible thing for anyone to experience. But yes, they said, we are sure to return to our Lord. We hope that our Lord will forgive us our sins as we were the first to believe. Yeah, I mean, that's presumably necessary. Like, if it's a carrot and stick thing, right? You threaten them with eternal damnation if they don't accept, and it does go back to the things we've read earlier, and this sort of I love this metaphor, like this poetic metaphor of this bridge you have to cross to get to God. And if you were faithful from the first get-go, your faith came easily to you, you would casually walk across this bridge in a matter of moments. But if you, for instance, if I at some point in my life convert, not very likely, but if I at some point in my life convert, I will probably be clambering across that bridge for thousands of years because of the weight of my doubt tearing down on me. And yeah, I think that's, by the way, better than just having empty belief, personally. But I mean, maybe God rewards those who are thoughtless. Makes us more like the animals of Eden. Then we revealed our will to Moses. Leave with my servants by night, for you will be pursued. Pharaoh sent messengers into the cities proclaiming, these people are a puny band, they have enraged us, and we are a large army on the alert. Ooh, exciting. Right? It's not just good poetry, this is a thriller, this is a good story. So it was that we made them leave their gardens and their springs, their treasures and their noble dwellings, and we gave such things later to the children of Israel. Well, I mean, you gave it to them somewhere else. You gave them such things, I guess. Because like, This is also why we have two translations, and we awarded it all to the children of Israel. That's obviously not what happened. Like, they escaped. They ran away from Egypt. And at no point in time, maybe, what was it, the Israeli-Egyptian war? Like, I guess there have been times when when the children of Israel have taken things from Egypt, but I believe they gave back Sinai. Not exactly an expert on Middle Eastern politics, as I'm sure you might guess. But yeah, it's like you gave them such things at a later date. You gave them safety and happiness in another place, and also after a long while, according to the stories I've read at least. Pharaoh and his people pursued them at sunrise. And as soon as the two sides came within sight of one another, Moses' followers said, "We shall definitely be caught." Yeah, see, good thriller. Moses said, "No, my Lord is with me, he will guide me." And we revealed to Moses, "Strike the sea with your staff." See, now this is a little bit bad poetry, right? Because at this point, you could have, you had a great thriller moment here of describing they were pushed to the edges of the ocean. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. They were being pursued. They couldn't flee around because they would be cut off. And then but now we suddenly get, oh, then there was an ocean and you have to put your staff in it. Like, you're skipping the fun bits. You're skipping the interesting bits. But we revealed to Moses, "Strike the sea with your staff." It parted, each side like a mighty mountain. And we brought the others to that place. We saved Moses and all his companions, and drowned the rest. There truly is a sign in this, though most people do not believe. Like, please somebody explain to me what the sign is. Because there isn't a sign in this. Not the one I can see. The sign is, you told me a good story. Is there a sign in, okay, if I tell you the story of Little Red Riding Hood, of walking through the forest and the wolf eats the grandmother and hides in her clothes. Like, there is a sign in this. There is a truth in this. And that's, you should be careful who you trust. The truth isn't that there was literally a Little Red Riding Hood and that literally went there. Maybe the truth in this text is philosophical. The truth is there is a path to good and compassion where we don't have to submit ourselves to tyrants. That is a good philosophical and poetic point to make, but it's not literal. So there is a sign in this. I can believe that. It's just that if you take it as religion, then the sign becomes muddled and confused, and it doesn't seem to work anymore. But yeah, like, if there is, why should someone telling me a story convince me of anything other than philosophy? Like, why should, if you tell me about Little Red Riding Hood, that doesn't convince me that there was a Little Red Riding Hood. That convinces me that we should be careful about who we trust. This is how we engage with things like this. So for me, this idea of there being a sign in this, it seems to me, maybe I feel like I'm having two different, completely different interpretations at the same time here, and I should be a little bit more generous. There is, what I'm saying here is, on the one hand, you have the feeling that this means there is a sign in this, because the way it's been used, this phrase has been used earlier, there is a sign in this. There is a sign in nature, there is a sign in the noble things in nature. This has been used to imply that, well, clearly everyone should believe in God. God is the most rational thing to believe in. Your reason leads you to believe in God. There are signs. But in this context, the sign is something different. And there is I think if you interpret it as the sign says there is a God and this is what God wants us to do, then it isn't definitive. Then it doesn't prove its point. If your argument is the other one, that this is a metaphorical sign, this is why I'm saying, when read as poetry, I can't fault it. When read as poetry and philosophy, the Qur'an is good, wise, and useful. When read as literal word of God, it's problematic. It's damaging, and it just leads to people imposing their own bigotries and biases onto God, because it's it's like the appeals are constantly, oh, it's so obvious, it's so obvious, it's so if it is so obvious, then obviously what I think is true already. Like, I don't have to engage my brain anymore because it's so obvious, right? And then everyone ends up having their slightly different view of what God is, and they're all just versions of themselves being imposed on God, their own values being imposed on God. Um, and there's a problem with insisting the obviousness of things. You have to, like, appeals to incredulity, or appeals to credulity in this case, or appeals to uh, common sense, I guess, is not is there. It's not a useful thing to do. Your Lord alone is the Almighty, the Merciful. So there is a sign, and most of them do not believe that your Lord alone is the Almighty, the Merciful. So, the story of Abraham. When Abraham asked his father and his people, "What do you worship?" They said, "We worship idols and are constantly in attendance of them." Probably summarizing a little bit here, but yeah, that makes sense. They worship a very, like, typical of pagan faith is because you have loads of petty gods. It's very easy to sort of symbolize them and sort of evoke them and tie them to physical things rather than with sort of the one true God idea, the sort of monotheistic idea. It becomes less. You can't really, like, if you make any idol of God cannot be anything more than like toenail clipping at best, right? The sweat of God would itself be a relic beyond our comprehension. So Abraham asked, "Do they hear you when you call? Do they help you or harm you?" Probably both. They replied, "No, but this is what we saw our fathers doing." Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, this is, let's read it as philosophy. Should this not be a criticism of your own willingness to believe in culture, right? Like, should this not be a way for you to, a guidance, a way, something that tells you the things you have been told, the things your forefathers believed, what you saw your fathers doing, what you saw your fathers and mothers and everyone in your life doing? That's not enough. In order to actually have good faith, you need to engage more than just, well, we did this because we're, like, being a cultural Muslim is pretty much exactly what Abraham's family, like, they were just culturally pagan. Like, should this not be a grounds for critical thinking? Should this not be an inspiration to think critically? Abraham asked, "Those idols you have worshipped, you and your forefathers." Actually, I want to make a point here before. This is because I'm noticing here, like, my change in tone, and I think this is a useful change in tone, because here because I'm really getting at what my point is. If, like, and I'll repeat it again, when read as philosophy, it's great. When read as the literal word of God, not so much. So for me, yeah, I'm just glad my change in tone here is when, instead of seeing this and being like, well, Muhammad is clearly being a little bit tricky with his language and sort of giving, like, straw manning, it's called. Like, well, because like I said when I read, "Did they if you or harm you?" If I'm imagining a genuine pagan, like someone who genuinely believes that these multifaceted gods are represented by these idols, then the answer is yes. They help and harm us in different ways, in different times, and for different reasons. But it seems like he's saying, "Oh no, but they're actually not that sophisticated. They're just doing whatever they're doing." And, like, if you're reading, like, again, if we're reading this literally as this is literally what Muhammad is saying, then it becomes kind of weird, because he's strawmanning. He's using a logical fallacy. However, when read as philosophy and poetry, it's very clever. He's saying, you, listener, do not be like Abraham's father and his companions. Be better. Learn from their mistakes. Grow and become smarter, wiser. Do not just do what you saw your fathers doing. Reflect and explore on this. Abraham said, those idols you have worshipped, you and your forefathers, are my enemies. Not so the Lord of the worlds, who created, not so the Lord of the worlds who created me. It is he who guides me, he who gives me food and drink, he who cures me when I am ill, he who will make me die and then give me life again, and he who will, I hope, forgive my faults on the day of judgment. So, let me just do a quick, it is he who guides me, fair enough, philosophy, very good. He who gives me food and drink, nature, so God is nature. God is, or even not even just nature, like most of society, like I get my food and drink from the store, and the store gets it from like people, farmers, right, growing it. Like, oh, but the earth was made, but then we're getting back to God as nature, and it is just a little bit of pagan, but essentially giving this idea of all of the good things come from God and all of the bad things don't come from God. Like, if God is the one who gives you food and drink, like, to quote my favorite philosopher, Terry Pratchett, didn't like the label philosopher either. If just because it's not nice doesn't mean it's not miraculous. He who cures me when I'm ill, your immune system. He will make me die and then give me life again. It's something we have. I can make you die, sure, nature. Give me life again. And I've never seen that happen ever. Like, I've heard people tell me that that's happened, but only because of like religion, only because they've been told by somebody else. Like, even if they claim that they've been told by God that this will happen. Like, if I hear voices in my head telling me that I'm going to come back to life, or that something magical will happen that I've never seen happen, maybe there's grounds to be a little bit critical of my own internal system here. He will, I hope, forgive my faults on the day of judgment. And here I think we go back to the beauty of it as poetry, right? It has to do with you being able to forgive yourself, you being able to cope with your own faults. And as such, God is a useful thought experiment. It's useful to sort of be like, imagine this perfect being judging me. Like, virtue ethics very much is very similar to this. Like, virtue ethics says, imagine this idealized, virtuous person. What would they do? How would they engage in their life? And as such, like, this theism is essentially a similar way of doing this. Imagine this perfectly virtuous being who could perfectly judge anything, any action. Well, would they judge me fairly? Would they understand what I did? And by doing this, you have a very good thought experiment which helps you critically examine your own decisions, your own faults. Being like, well, I did this yesterday, and would this virtuous being say that that was okay? And they might do. And then you sort of engage, well, this is what I did wrong, this is what I can do better next time. It's a useful thing to do. Very useful, very good philosophy, very good poetry, not very good religion. Indeed, no. I say not very good religion. It is perfectly par for the course for religion. That's the problem. Not a big fan when people go, I know the will of God, rather than I have access to ways of thinking which are productive and help me through my life, that guide me. Like, it's scrolling up. He who guides me. Like, as guidance, religion can probably be very useful. As dictums, as literal truths, as the word of God that cannot be disputed or considered or mocked or must be revered at all times, not so. That said, going back to this this thought experiment of a perfectly virtuous being, if you start thinking of this perfectly, like, criticizing this perfectly virtuous being, that's probably like ruins the thought experiment, right? It's, well, actually, this God is petty, mean. Like, when I describe the God of the Old Testament, because the Old Testament is really, really aggressive, and really anti-human, really hates humans, it seems. And you do see some of this in the Qur'an as well. This God if I ask myself, what would God want me to do? I go, well, God would want me to kill all the unbelievers. God would want me to do all of these evil things, right? God would make me an evil being because my view of God isn't as this perfectly virtuous being. So it's a if we are critical of God, it kind of ruins the philosophy of it. But what it to criticize my own statement here, what it is useful for is critically examining your own values. So if you have imposed, like I said, if you've made God in your own image and imposed your own faults on God, it is very valuable to be able to criticize what you think God is, what you think God wants from you. My Lord, grant me wisdom, join me with the righteous, give me a good name among later generations. Make me one of those given the garden of bliss. Forgive my father, for he is one of those who have gone astray. And do not disgrace me on the day when all people are resurrected, the day when neither wealth nor children can help, when the only one who will be saved is the one who comes before God with a heart devoted to him. Forgive my father. My Lord, grant me wisdom. Like, reminds me honestly of my favorite prayer. I'm trying to understand what's the point of this. It's just a prayer. It sounds like it's just a sort of an appeal to be and it goes back to this sort of as philosophy. Very cool, very interesting. Give me a good name among later generations. It's a good way of thinking about things. Make me one of those given the garden of bliss. Now we're starting to veer off into this weird esoteric, spiritual, superstitious way of thinking. Forgive my father, for he is one of those who have gone astray. That's also a valuable thing to think about, especially given that we know the story of Abraham is about him not being willing to sacrifice his own son. Did Abraham's father sacrifice his own? One would expect, right? That the moment Abraham is the one who breaks with tradition and changes the way they do things. So clearly, Abraham's father very astray. Don't kill children. That's pro tip, in case none of you had realized. And do not disgrace me on the day when all people are resurrected, the day when neither wealth nor children can help. So in this, now we're reading it again. Reading as philosophy helps because neither wealth nor children can help. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how well you trained your children to serve you. It matters who you are. You are the one being weighed. You can't point to all of these other things and say, well, actually, I'm fine. You are judged on your own actions. And only those... Actually, this is a better translation, or the one I agree with more. With a pure heart, right? It seems to imply that the important thing here isn't a heart devoted to him, because this is sort of a tautology. It sort of explains it justifies itself, right? It says, well, being devoted to him, like I was saying, God is this theoretical conception of a perfectly virtuous being. Well, then being devoted to a perfectly virtuous being means it is you are motivated by virtue. But if you think of it just when written as a pure heart, it emphasizes this point, I think, better than saying a heart devoted to him, because people who have present like I said, made God in their own image, created their own conception of God, these people will feel like Muhammad talks about earlier in the book. It's these fake Muslims, these people who just pretend they are these people. There are hypocritical Muslims who are absolutely convinced, and all religious, that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is there are people who are convinced that they are the ones who are following the word of God, and I think you would all agree that they're not. I think the most egregious example of this is terrorists, right? We've seen pretty awful actions being done by pretty evil people, and these evil people are completely convinced that their hearts are devoted to God. They are absolutely convinced that this is true. And it is entirely possible to do enormous evil regardless of whether or not your heart is devoted to God. Because it's hard to tell, right? It's hard to know whether your heart is actually devoted to God or whether you're devoted to your own conception of God. Are you devoted to a virtuous being, or are you devoted to yourself? Are you do you love God, or do you love yourself? Are you a narcissist, or are you a God-fearing man? This saying devoted to him probably isn't helpful. Interestingly, I see on my screen, I see something else. I notice my recording doesn't catch my browser doing. That's a completely irrelevant point. I'll try and edit that out. When the garden is brought near to the righteous, and the fire is placed in full view of the misguided, it will be said to them, "Where are those you worshipped beside God? Can they help you now, or even help themselves?" And they will all be hurled into hell, together with those who misled them, and all of Iblis's supporters. Let's see. Where are those you worshipped? And when fire is placed, when garden is brought near, the fire is placed. Where are those? Essentially saying, actually, this goes back to the thing I said about the evil people like proclaiming they were following God. If, because I know another video I had where I read something written by an evil person. So I'm being very careful here not to be very explicit, but let's take the example of ISIS, right? We know they were evil. We know they were one of the more evil organizations in modern human history. These people will, in the event, or like imagining that God is real and like God is going to judge them, they will go, but actually we were following God. We were doing what you were telling us. And God says to them, no, you weren't. Clearly, like, stand by what he did. Don't blame me. Like God saying, don't blame me for your actions. You're the one who did the actions. So again, as philosophy, it's great. So much better. And so much more useful when read as philosophy and poetry than as something else. And all of Iblis's supporters, hi. I should probably specify here. I think, like, maybe it's different in the Quran, and I've gotten the impression it's different in the Quran. But in the Bible, Satan is what we would today call the devil's advocate, probably for good reason, right? Satan in the original story, the first time Satan is specifically described as Satan, it's in the story of Job. And what is he doing? Well, God is telling us that Job believes so much, Job is so pious, Job is so holy. And Satan says, well, actually, is he? Or maybe he's just doing well. Maybe he's just happy because his life is going well. And like, so for me, Iblis and Satan, and like equating these two, Satan and this character is the critic, the ability to sort of criticize. And I do support the ability to criticize. So I am a supporter of Iblis. There they will say to their gods, as they bicker among themselves, we were clearly misguided when we made you equal with the Lord of the worlds. Well, I guess thankfully I'm not doing that. I say all gods are bastards. Well, maybe that is making him equal. But like I'm saying that the critic is obviously not the same as the person making the statements. But that's not necessarily important. The critic, it doesn't necessarily have to be equal to God, but it doesn't mean he's not important. There are other ways of being important than just being God's servant, or being a servant to what you believe God wants, as we've seen from the more evil examples of this happening. It was the evildoers who led us astray. Now we have no intercessor and no true friend. If only we could live our lives again, we would be true believers. Yeah, maybe this is what they would say. And indeed, yeah, this is like when you've blamed everyone else for who you are, you are confronted on this by someone who cannot be bargained with. You would indeed falter in this way. You would indeed have to accept at some point that actually what I did was wrong. So yeah, as philosophy, great. There truly is a sign in this, though most of them do not believe. Your Lord alone is the Almighty, the Merciful. Just so we know, I hate how much it has to do this. It's sort of, or it doesn't have to, but it's sort of, it probably sounds nice, it's probably nice and poetic, but it's like, your Lord is the Almighty, the Merciful. Just repeat this. Repeat the truth over and over again, and you convince yourself that it's definitely true. It's like truth by repetition. The people of Noah too called the messengers liars. Their brother Noah said to them, "Will you not be mindful of God? I am a faithful messenger sent to you. Be mindful of God and obey me. I ask no reward of you, for my only reward is with the Lord of the worlds. Be mindful of God and obey me." They answered, "Why should we believe you when the worst sort of people follow you?" Now we're getting to it. Now we're getting to this. I think is a very important point. This chapter was made for me. But to be fair, as far as I've read so far, reading it as poetry is the most legitimate thing. Like this text gains legitimacy when thought about it as poetry. So I'm still very curious about disproving this. But here maybe we get this good criticism. Like, why I would say this. Why should we believe you when the worst sort of people follow you? Why is having faith useful when the people who do have, many of the people who do have faith don't seem to act any better, or indeed sometimes even act worse and use their faith as an excuse? So why should I believe when the worst sort of people follow you? He said, "What knowledge do I have of what they used to do?" Well, I still do, and in his name. "It is for my Lord alone to bring them to account. If only you could see, I will not drive believers away." Not drive believers away. I mean, is a fairly... Okay, so the defense here is... I mean, I have to read a lot into this, because what it says is worthless. Like, "I will not drive believers away" is by itself... Like, it's a confession. I'm not willing to criticize them because what they used to do. Like, it's not accepting any real criticism. It's not engaging. It's a bad faith. It's like Pharaoh earlier, right? It's a bad faith engagement with the criticism. Like, why should we believe you when the worst sort of people? Well, they're not actually that bad anymore. And in any case, it's just for God to decide. I'm not gonna get rid of my followers just because they might have done something bad in the past. Like, that's not the criticism here. The criticism is, why don't you take them to task? Why don't you make your followers better? Why don't you critically examine them? But let me do the thing that Pharaoh did not. Let me do what Noah does not do. And let me steelman this position. Because I think that maybe what this could mean is that it is better to have people who are flawed, because everyone is going to be flawed anyway, who are flawed, who are open to being taught the truth. It's like me, honestly, right? I'm here reading the Quran, right? Obviously, I'm more open to having these ideas given to me. I'm not a believer, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I am more closely related to these. I'm more willing to engage with these ideas. So you wouldn't drive me away, and obviously none of you, like I mentioned in my other video, you've all been very, very kind to me. You're not trying to drive me away. You're trying to bring me in because you think that I can be made to be a better person by you accepting me for all of my faults. So this is probably the steelman position of what Noah is trying to say. I would prefer it if this holy book, dictated by God's chosen prophet, actually expressed itself a little bit more clearly. Maybe that would be useful, other than "I will not drive believers away." They could have said, maybe I will communicate. That said, I do see that the next sentence, perhaps, "I'm only here to give people a clear warning." The idea being here, well, it does kind of answer this. It does kind of indicate that you are trying to communicate what the truth is, like what it is. You're warning them of their immorality. So in that sense, it is doing exactly what I'm asking. But it's not very clear that that's what, like, you're. I was only given how to give them a clear warning of what's to come. Well, the problem here isn't that believers, like I said, I'm an example here of a non-believer engaging with this. So it's not just about believers being driven away. It's about people being open to criticism being driven away. And you do want to stress the idea that these people, it's not just that they used to do or what they used to do. Like, it's, you are supposed to actually critically engage the people who follow you. If they just come to you and say, I'm a believer, then you go, great, here is the warning of things to come, here's the truth. And they say, yeah, we definitely believe that, and they're not even listening. It's just, I don't know if you've seen the Simpsons episode where you see inside Homer's head, and it's just this monkey with these the symbols just banging together. It's you in order to actually it's in order to actually, you want to not just drive away, you want to drive away these people. You want to drive away is probably not the right word. You want them to critically examine their own beliefs. It's not just enough to say, I've given them a clear warning, I've told them what's true, I'm going to move on with my life. Like, well, anyone can do that. Like, anyone can say, make a list of things, this is what I think you should do to be good, and if you don't do this, then God will punish you. Anyone can do that. This is not a very impressive thing to do. You know, actually, it's a little bit, like, I've been praising it quite a lot this far, but this is bad philosophy. This is not great philosophy. This is poor philosophy. You can do better than this. So, they said, those people, like, Noah gives his speech, I'm not going to drive away these people, even though they're clearly evil, which is what he's saying. So they said, Noah, if you do not stop this, you will be stoned. Okay, well, wow, that's a bit of an escalation. He said, my Lord, my people have rejected me, so make firm judgment between me and them, and save me and my believing followers. So he saved him and his followers in the fully laden ship, and drowned the rest. And drowned the rest. And drowned the rest. Oh, I guess that's the theme of this. I guess we know what the title is of this episode. There truly is a sign in this, though most of them do not believe. Your Lord alone is the most blah, 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 blah. Yes, very good. Very impressive. Repetition is the... What? Repetition is the soul of wit, I was about to say, which is clearly... we're halfway through. Clearly it's a little bit opposite of the original quote. Brevity is the soul of wit. The people of Ad too called the messengers liars. Their brother Hud said to them, will you not be mindful of God? I am a faithful messenger sent to you. Be mindful of God and obey me. See, this is where we get into the problems. Religion has, like, I'm not a big fan of Karl Marx, but his idea, this phrase, religion is the opium of the masses. It's very, very much of human history has been religion. Like, look, it's probably more obvious if you look before Islam, before Christianity, before Judaism even, back in the way, way pagan days. You have religion, like with the Pharaoh, for instance. Religion was the tool to use, like, be mindful, like the Pharaoh would say, be mindful of the gods and obey me. Be mindful that I am God's messenger. I am one of the gods. That's what the Pharaoh would say. So you should obey me. So here we get this repetition, this continuation of this most dangerous part of religion, which is obey me. It's a tyranny tool. It's a tool for making people do what you tell them to, not to make them critically examine their beliefs. It does go a little bit back to what I said earlier, though. Like, here, at least we have a little bit of a harsher pushback against the followers. At least here we have what Noah didn't have, where he's like, well, actually, I'm going to make my followers do the right thing. It's not just enough that I'm going to warn them that if they do the wrong thing, then somebody else will take over their punishment. No, I'm actually going to make some effort. However, like, maybe instead of saying things like, instead of spending sentences explaining, but most of them do not believe, even though it's clearly a sign from God, instead of spending time doing that, spend time explaining why it's not just about obedience. It's not just about doing what you're told. It's not just a tool for control. It's about understanding why something is moral or not immoral. This is much more valuable than a child who, like, if you imagine a child who does the right thing for fear of punishment versus a child who does the right thing because they understand how the victims of their actions might feel. Like a child who punches people they don't when they get upset. You might punish them, but you should also explain to them that they don't want to be punched when they annoy other people. You explain to them that this sort of ruins the situation, and the child who stops punching children or their peers because they know that they will suffer for it is less moral than the child who understands what you say and understands the empathy necessary to not hurt other people just because they themselves feel hurt. So, what was it? HUD? Yeah, HUD is speaking. I ask no reward of you, for my only reward is with the Lord of worlds. How can you be so vain that you set up monuments on every high place? I can't comment on this without honestly being racist, because what little information I have of Arab cultures, they're much more vain than me. I'm the Diogenes simp. I'm the guy who proclaims that the guy who lived in a trash heap, who didn't wash, who threw away his bowl because he saw a child cupping their hands to get food and water. Like, the vanity, there are steps of vanity. Was there a fly here? There's steps of vanity beyond just setting up monuments. Like, I haven't had a haircut in 7 years or more. Yeah, because I stopped. Fun fact: hairdressers are a scam. Cut your own hair or don't cut it at all. That's my hint. But anyway, like, this idea of vanity criticizing criticizing vanity, to me, religious people criticizing vanity when a great part of religion is building all of these fancy pants houses and being like, look how pretty our house is. That's why you should believe in God. And this imposition of power through this overt displays of vanity is to me, this is hilarious. Honestly, this is ridiculous. That it's a pot calling the kettle black moment. But there you go. Do you build fortresses because you hope to be immortal? Mainly to protect from people who hope that we are very mortal. Why do you act like tyrants whenever you attack someone? Ditto. This, I think, serves as a good criticism of earlier in the book, when we have, like, I called it the sword surah. Why do you act like tyrants when you attack? Like, why search them out wherever they are, when most of them are innocent in the actions of their leaders? Like, why impose your will? Why, indeed, do you say things like, be mindful of God and obey me? Why do you act like tyrants? Oh my God, it doesn't. Immediately the next sentence. Why do you act like tyrants and obey me? Like, what? Okay, why do you act so viciously, I guess, is probably a more, but this is one of those where it's like, obey me, obey me, obey me. Oh, why are you so vicious? Why are you so cruel? But obey me, or God will punish you. It's It's a little bit tragic, but there we go. Be mindful of him who has provided you with everything you know, good or bad. He has given you livestock, sons and gardens and springs. For I truly fear that the torment of a grievous day will overtake you. I'm sure you do, but that doesn't mean I do. They replied, it makes no difference to us whether you warn us or not, for we only do what our forefathers used to do. Presumably they were fine. Like, why should we change our ways now? Like, this is why these appeals to God are extremely unproductive, right? Because you convince them that essentially what you're doing is you're trying to convince them you should obey me. You're convincing them that you're a messenger of God, you're the one sharing God's word, so therefore you should obey me, and that's why you should do all of the moral things. When you can just skip a step, you can just go, you should do the moral things because they're moral. You can appeal to reason and logic and ethics. Like we've over 1,000 years, over 2,500 years. Nicomachean ethics was already out. It was already published when this was recited. This concept of using reason to achieve moral understanding already existed. So why are we going with this appeal to do what we say, like, believe me because I am the messenger of God, and then do what's moral? Don't, like, instead of teaching people to be the child who is afraid of punishment, teach them to be the child who understands what they're doing and why what they're doing is wrong. And if you don't do that, then you just end up with these people who are absolutely convinced that they are moral, that they are following the word of God, even though they've just invented their own version of God and just imposed all of their own flaws onto this God. And it's especially bad if you spend as much time insisting God is great and merciful and almighty as you do explaining it. Like, explaining why you should do things seems secondary to praising God. And that's the opposite order of things. Understanding why you should do things is much more important than just obeying, just inspiring obedience. They denounced him as a liar, and so we destroyed them. There truly is a sign in this, though most of them do not believe. Your Lord is certainly the Almighty, the most merciful. As soon as I read there truly is, and my brain goes, oh, okay, it's the repetition again. Okay, good. There's a sign in this. Oh, okay. There's a sign in their destruction. There's a sign in their evil, and the evil that God invokes upon other people. The sign being, we shall not be punished. I mean, it is a good story. It's like, oh well. Those naughty kids, they didn't do as I told them, and they were eaten by bears, right? It's very, very childish, very, very much not how... I mean, it makes sense, to be fair. Like, if you believe in God and all of that, it makes sense that God is speaking to us as if we are very stupid children, because obviously, comparatively, that's probably the best comparison. But we've grown past that. You've had almost 2,000 years now, or 1,600 years now, where you can do better. I believe in you. You have the capacity not just to memorize what God says, but actually to build upon it. Stand on the shoulders of giants. Do the Newton thing, right? You can acknowledge that the Prophet Muhammad was a much better philosopher than you could possibly ever be. That his insight into the divine is much greater than you could ever achieve. While still clambering onto his back, climbing up and standing on the top of his head and going a little bit farther, reaching just a little bit higher. Even if you are even just a millimeter and now like a plank length higher. That's a science joke for you nerds out there. Even if you're just slightly better, that's a good step. And I think it's much more important to engage with ideas in this way, where you build upon the past. That's what makes humans so much better than all of the other animals. We do this. We read books. We build upon the past. Like, I don't need to rediscover the wheel. Somebody else invented the wheel. I don't need to rediscover the car. Somebody else discovered the car. We can now build better cars instead of trying to figure everything out. Instead of sort of insisting that, well, the guy who invented the wheel, he was so clever, we shouldn't build upon that. Oh, the guy who invented the car, he was so clever, we shouldn't, like, no, opposite. You have been given a great wise philosopher or poet has given you some insight, and instead of building upon it, it's like, even if this is genuinely God's word, surely he must want us to actually progress beyond just at any point. He must want progress. Like, we're not done, we're not finished. Like, why should we expect ourselves to stop having to engage and learn? And, like, does God tell us how to deal with AI? Like, maybe we need to actually explore what artificial intelligence means and how we engage with this. Does God tell us how we should live our lives in a world with computer phones? We do actually have to build upon what we've learned in the past, because we're in a different society right now. And so, for the same reasons, I think it's the same principle when I say that we should give women more rights than the Quran gives them, because we can build upon it in the same way that like a car is built upon a wheel and an electric car builds upon a car again. We can learn and progress and go beyond what the people of the past did. This was probably the best that the God could make these people do. But these people, 1,600 years ago, these people were not the best that people could ever be. If you genuinely believe that we were perfect over 1,000 years ago, then I'm not sure there is anything hopeful. Then I'm going to go straight back to Islamophobia again. Honestly, then we're gonna hardcore double down, because we have to be able to progress. We have to be able to learn from the past. We have to be able to learn to be better than the people. Like, it's not just because it's like one of the things people say, like in criticism, or Muslims say in criticism of Christianity, is this veneration of Jesus, is like Jesus as God. That's like, oh, we don't do that, ha ha ha. That's something I've heard Muslims say, or not like that, obviously, but they don't. I've heard them sort of communicate this idea that the venerating Jesus as God is silly, and I agree, it is silly. But it's not that you haven't actually not done that. The veneration of Muhammad is just the same. It's just as this, according to your own book, he was a man. And men are flawed. Men have faults. Men are not perfect. He did the best he could. He did the best he could with a load of wisdom and assistance from God, which is probably a lot better than anyone at the time. And he did make other people at the time better. However, if you then go, well, because of that, he was perfect, then you are doing then you have imposed. You've said that Muhammad is God. You're no different than the Christians. You're no different than the Christians who criticize for making man into a god, because that's what you've done. You've claimed that the actions, like the attitudes and actions of Muhammad, were perfect. That is exactly what the Christians say about Jesus. So, like, make some progress here. That was a long speech, honestly. Oh, yes. So yeah, I think that's probably a big deal for me. I think with regards to religion, but let's continue. Maybe we still want to find out if poetry is the wrong way of reading this. Maybe there is a clear sign in all of this that I refuse to see. But I try at least. I'm looking under the rock, even though I am half blind apparently. At least we're trying something. But I do think that it is a folly to look to the past for perfection. You can look to the past for guidance towards perfection, but like, a journey that was started 1600 years ago should still be continued. It feels like the prophet was giving a guidance, assuming this is true, assuming God genuinely exists and genuinely came down and said, this is how you should live. He was pointing us in the right direction. Muhammad went leapt in the right direction. He dragged his people with him. He moved them so much further. And now you stopped moving. You're not continuing the journey. You just stopped where he stopped. Like, do you genuinely need someone to do everything for you? Can you not actually progress on your own? Come on. But yeah, so let's go back to the poetry. The people of Thamud too called the messengers liars. Another one of these great examples. I wonder if he's going to drown them. Ho ho ho. Let's see. Their brother Salih said to them, will you not be mindful of God? I am a faithful messenger to you. Be mindful of God and obey me. Scary again. I ask no reward for you, for my only reward is with the Lord of the worlds. Do you think you will be left secure forever in what you have here? Obviously not. Gardens, springs, fields, palm trees laden with fruit. Oops. Carving your fine houses from the mountains. No. And I don't have the palm trees, but I'm living in a nice place, or in a world, or in a country where our fine houses are carved from the mountains. Be mindful of God and obey me. Be mindful of God and obey me. Remember that they keep saying that. This is exactly what you do if you're trying to control. Like, it's exactly what Pharaoh did. It's exactly what the pagans did earlier in the Mesopotamia and in Babylon and the Roman Empire. Like Augustus Caesar, he proclaimed himself as God, right? Or he deified himself. I think it might have been Octavian eventually. But this sort of deification of king, all of the kings said they were chosen by God. Be mindful of God and obey me. This is how we see religion being used as a tool for control. This is why I think it's a problem believing in religion. Why I think it's better, even if there is a God, I think it's probably better to be an atheist, because then you avoid these pitfalls. You avoid these people using God as a shield or using God as a tool for control. Do not obey those who are given to excess and who spread corruption in the land instead of doing what is right. Which may very well be the people who say, be mindful of God and obey me, right? Do not obey those who are given to excess and spread corruption. Like Noah said, who am I to care or to control the people? Well, are you then not spreading corruption instead of doing what is right? Are you not instead, when you could be driving them away, could you not instead, driving them away to limit their corruption, these people who have done evil things? Why should we follow you when all these people who are the worst kinds of people? Well, instead of, you're bringing them together and giving them sanctuary and letting them spread their corruption. Why should I obey you when you do this? Why should I, the argument, this here is arguing against what has happened earlier, which is one of the things I'm now, upon reflection, I think this might be a good thing in the Quran, because I think actually the Quran does give you a lot of tools to criticize itself. It gives you a lot of tools to be able to, honestly, this is probably the closest I've been to believing in God, because it seems to me that, and obviously it's not, I don't think, even though it's been the closest I am to believing in God, I think it's miles away from being a Muslim, because for me, the Quran itself gives you the tools to argue against the Quran. It gives you the tool. It's like if God kind of finally realized, actually, we can't just go down and tell people what the truth is, because they're just not going to do anything with it. They're just going to stop. They're just going to do what we tell them and then stop and then assume they're done. They don't need to do anything more. I think I've used this example before, like Abraham with Isaac. Well, it's a good thing that Abraham didn't sacrifice his son, but wouldn't it even be better if he didn't sacrifice his son's foreskin? Right? We can move past this. And it feels like maybe if there really is a God, it seems almost like God has spent so much time trying to teach us and being so frustrated that we just won't listen, that he finally gives us this book. And this book is specifically designed to be self-contradictory in order for us to be able to learn how to critically examine and move past our earlier beliefs. And this is one of those sentences that I feel like supports this view, is that it actually use this understanding. Do not obey those given to excess and spread corruption instead of doing what is right. Well, go back to all of these statements of obeying me and of Noah saying, well, actually all of these words kinds of people. No, actually, this is a critical thing. Noah wasn't perfect. Noah was probably better than the people around him, but that doesn't mean he was perfect, right? Same for Muhammad, same for Thamud, same for Moses. All of these people made progress, but they're not the end. They're just a step in the right direction. And we didn't have to stop walking just because, stop moving in the right direction. So use these little critical thinking tricks. These, like, in the same way that the idea of the hypocritical Muslims, the idea of the virtuous God. Use these critical thinking tricks, and you won't become a Muslim, because I don't think, because like I'm saying, I'm obviously saying that the Quran is contradictory, self-defeating, but I'm saying that if there really is a God, it does make sense that he would give us a book that is self-defeating in order to train us in critical thinking. It's kind of like if I were teaching a philosophy class, I would give them books. Many of them I would think are wrong because it engages them, their ability to think critically. If you are like teaching skepticism, you don't go, well, here's this really nerdy, accurate book about psychology. You actually go, well, here are these flat earthers. Like, why? How do we know that the flat earthers are wrong? Well, like, it's almost like God is giving. I'm obviously comparing it there to flat earthers, which, let's be clear, even the Quran isn't as bad as flat earthers. Though it has inspired quite a lot of people to be creationists, which is almost exactly as stupid as flat earthers. But yeah, it's making progress might be, yeah. Honestly, like I said, this is probably the closest I've been to be religious since that story when I was 15 and I read The God Delusion. But it is very clearly a God who is disappointed in religion. I am like my belief in God seems very much predicated on the fact that God doesn't want us to be religious. So continuing on, the people who it was Thamud, just double checking here. Okay, come on. Their brother Salih, sorry, the people of Thamud, the brother Salih. Okay. So the brother of everyone in Salih said to them, and the people said to Salih, let's see, they replied, they said, you are bewitched. You are nothing but a man like us. Show us a sign if you are telling the truth. He said, here is a camel. She should have her turn to drink, and so should you, each on a specified day. So do not harm her, or the punishment of a terrible day will befall you. Now, this is quite interesting. We've been told this story before. A repetition is very much important to the Quran, which again, it makes it very annoying, because it's like, why, if a clear book, like, why don't you just condense all of the information to one point, instead of, like, you're repeating the same stories over and over and over again, when you could have actually explored and explained the principles and ideals. But let's take a moment, that aside, let's take a moment here to acknowledge what's actually quite interesting here is they are asking for a sign from him for telling the truth, and the way they get a sign is by harming her. Because just having a camel isn't like a. Presumably, this wasn't the first time they'd seen a camel, right? This isn't. God didn't invent camels specifically for this example. There were probably camels beforehand, and this was just a camel that was sacred or supposed to be like follow the obedient. But the only way for them to get a sign is actually to harm them, so that harm the camel. So, like, isn't this sort of? I guess that you can sort of coyly say that well, he knew that they would harm her, and that's why he gave them. But it's like this is a very mean. That goes back to this. Why does God make us sin? Like, why does God make us sin and then punish us for sinning? It's really. This is really a good example of that kind of thinking. Is like he's telling us they're asking for signs, they're asking for proof, and he's like, he's giving us a temptation, right? Well, I'm not going to give you a proof unless you do this evil thing. And if you do this evil thing, you will be punished. And it will be your fault because you did this evil thing. But I'm just... But the context of you being so curious, like it's curiosity killed the cat kind of scenario, right? Guess that would... Maybe that's the message here, right? It's maybe your curiosity and your critical thinking can harm you, but given how how useful critical thinking is in the modern age, it's probably not a wise thing to start telling people not to do critical thinking. But they hamstrung her. In the morning, they had cause to regret it. The punishment fell upon them. There truly is a sign in this, though most of them will not believe. Your Lord alone is the Almighty and the Merciful, right? God made them sin, like he gave them like it's such a mean thing to do to someone. It's like you're it's like you're giving a child poison and being like, don't eat this or you will die. But you're like putting it in front of them and like wrapping them in candy wrappers and just sort of making them be like that. Like the kid is like, I want candy, and your answer is, don't drink that poison on the table. And then like, of course it's gonna drink the poison on the table. Like what did you expect was going to happen? Either Sally is very stupid, or God is very stupid, or both, or perhaps there is some other message in this, some philosophy, some poetry that is not clear and concise, that is not immediately obvious, but in fact that requires a little bit more than just the literal reading of it. Because the literal reading is of an abusive parent. The people of Lot too called the messengers liars. Oh my god, this is all going to be stories, isn't it? It's all going to be stories. It's all going to be stories, and this is apparently proof that it's not poetry. Like I said, the Quran is its own work, like its own best critic. Like this isn't poetry, but here's all the poetry stories. What? It's like it's like somebody is like looking you in your face and saying like the opposite. It's like me staring in your eyes and saying I'm black. And like, no, you're obviously not. Like what's it feels surreal what I'm experiencing here. This is not poetry. By the way, here's all the stories about our ancestors. What? That's what poetry is. Their brother Lot said to them, will you not be mindful of God? So yeah, their brother is in the people of Lot and the people of Thamud. Okay, so I understand the past one. The brother Salih was just a person, a member of the community of Thamud. Will you not be mindful of God? I'm a faithful messenger to you. Yeah, anyone can say that. Be mindful of God and obey me. I ask no reward from you, except your obedience. For my only reward, except your obedience, is with the Lord of the worlds. Must you, unlike other people, lust after males and abandon the wives that God has created for you? Okay, right? Okay, this is just a little bit of homophobia. And abandon the wives that God has created for you. You are exceeding all bounds. Must you, unlike other people... I mean, it is the story of Lot is about this, but it obviously is a homophobic story. Um, Sodom and Gomorrah and sodomy and all of that. And abandon the wives that God has created for you. Like, I don't really like. I don't really want to give credit here. If you're so unclear that this is like this can easily be interpreted as homophobia, and it probably was interpreted as homophobia, and it probably still is interpreted as, well, gay people being gay is bad. Well, maybe cheating on your wives. Like, why? Maybe I did the thing I said I wasn't going to do, but maybe abandoning your wife is the problem here. Maybe that's the moral lesson here. Not necessarily. That said, like, population control was also very important back in the day, and a lot of people, like a lot of the pushback against contraception and abortion, has been mainly driven by cynical politicians being like, "Oh no, we need more children to fight our wars and to build our factories and stuff like that." So this is just par for the course with old books. But they replied, "Lot, if you do not stop this, you will be driven away," which is fair enough. If you don't stop berating us for nothing, you will be driven away, driven into your own bedroom to talk shit about us into a camera. So he said, "I loathe what you do. Lord, save me and my family for what they are doing." We saved him and all his family, except for an old woman who stayed behind. Then we destroyed the others. So, except for... Oh, there's a note here? Lot's wife who betrayed her husband. Yeah, I thought so. I thought it was the... Betrayal was like turning around, though. Betrayal was not doing as she was told, which is... that's a little bit sketchy. But yeah, except for an old woman who stayed behind. It's just a... Because knowing what story they're referencing is always kind of hilarious, because the story as I've been told it is about the rape of the angels, and like, or the attempted rape, and Lot giving up his daughters instead, which is horrifying, but then departing, and then Lot commanding, "Do not look back," and then she's turned into a pillar of salt, which is obviously quite a silly story, and it's sort of emblematic of earlier sort of pseudo pagan stories, much more sort of vague and poetic, but it still is sort of... so I can understand why this chapter or this surah is abandoning that kind of framing, but it's just weird to read it, like, just sort of, oh, and she was an old woman and she'd stayed behind. It sounds like it was Lot's grandmother who just, "Oh, I'm too old, I'm just gonna stay here and die," right? It sounds more like that. "And then we destroyed the others and poured a rain of destruction down upon them," almost drowning. We're 3 out of 6, I think. "How dreadful that rain was for those who had been forewarned. There truly is a sign in this for those most of them will not believe. Our Lord alone is the Almighty, the Merciful." "The forest dwellers too called the messengers liars." I think that might be us. The Germanics, I think, maybe. When Shuaib said to them, well, maybe they're not then. "Will you not be mindful of God? I am a faithful messenger to you. Be mindful of God and obey me. I ask no reward for you, except... for my only reward is with the Lord of the worlds. Give full measure. Do not sell others short. Weigh with correct scales. Do not deprive people of what is theirs. Do not spread corruption on the earth. Be mindful of God who created you and your former generations." So, like this. See, first time in this whole thing where we actually have some moral principles, some appeals to our reason, our sense of our ethics, which isn't just do what I tell you. Right? This is not ethical. Like, this is bad ethics. You don't do what I tell you, not good ethics, right? Because if do what I tell you is good ethics, then doing what the Pharaoh tells you, why isn't that good ethics? Why isn't it good ethics to do what your forefathers did, right? It's just, well, listen to me because I claim that I'm the true word of God. Well, if somebody else claims they're the true messenger of God, what do you do then? Well, you're lost. Let's give up. Ah, well, they might both be true, right? What do you do then? But here we have some good thing. Give them full measure. Do not sell others short. Nice. Be fair and even-handed, and generous even. Weigh with correct scales. Fairness, very good. Of fairness is a good principle. Do not deprive people of what is theirs. Property rights enshrined in the Qur'an, very good. Do not spread corruption on the earth. Kind of vague, but I mean, sure, why not? And be mindful of God who created you in former generations. Is sort of, it's punctuation at this point. The sort of godness is punctuation, and it's just so much punctuation in this book. Instead of this stuff, which is great, this stuff is nice. Like, we have 1, 2, 3 good lines. What's that called? There are not surahs, verse. I forget. I'll remember next time. But like, in this mass, like, we're 183 in, and we, like, probably there were some earlier that I kind of skipped over, but like, let's double it, let's triple it even. Let's say 9 out of 183. 1 in 20. 1 in 20. Like, why is only 5% of it guidance, and the rest, like, we've repeated that God is the most merciful and almighty, and there are signs in this for all those who would believe, so many times, but we don't even repeat these messages of way of fairness and of property rights. Like, these are good, valuable messages, but they're such a small part of the whole picture. Why? What's clear about this? Maybe there's some other message. Maybe it's a little bit of poetry involved. But they replied, "You are bewitched. You are nothing but a man like us. In fact, we think you are a liar. Make bits of the heavens fall down on us if you are telling the truth." He said, "My Lord knows best what you do." They called him a liar, so the torment of the day of shadow came upon them. It was the torment of a terrible day. Surely, there is truly a sign in this, though most of you will not believe. Your Lord alone is the Almighty, the Merciful. Yet another repetition. Truly, this Quran has been sent down by the Lord of worlds. When have you ever proven this? What? You told me 7 stories now? 8, I think? Of people rejecting the word of God and being punished, and then it's like, oh, this is proof. Like, do you know how many stories of Norse mythology I've read? Like, Odin punishes people, Thor punishes people. Like, Thor drank. There's the story of one of my. I'm gonna paraphrase it because I only read it when I was little. The story of Thor being tricked by Loki, where he gets this magical horn he drinks from. He's in a drinking competition because we are pro-alcohol, our Viking ancestors. It was a drinking competition that Thor went into, and Loki connects the horn so that he starts drinking the oceans, and that's why we have beaches, right? Is that proof that Thor makes thunder happen? No, obviously not. Like, it's like this statement, truly the Quran has been sent down from the Lord, where presumably he thinks, or it's everything is supposed to prove this, but it's no more proof than any other storyteller. Any other storyteller about punishments. Maybe the repetition is the thing. Oh, because they all got the same message. Like, well, we can do that. Like the story of the 3 little pigs. Like, is that truly truly there is a wolf that blows down houses? Like, no, like, there is a truth in it. It's build better houses, but like, build houses that can resist the environment you live in. Build houses that can protect you from danger. But this being proof that it's sent down by the Lord of Worlds it's not. It's simply stated over and over again. It's stated that this is true, this is true, this is true, this is true. Anyone can say this is true over and over again. The only reason why people like me don't is because that's bad thinking. I don't want to encourage people not to think. I want to encourage people to think. And two thing, you don't jump to the conclusion. You go, and what do you think this means? And how do you think this is true? What is the message of this? I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna do praise Christianity a little bit here, because my favorite story of all of the stories is when Jesus is asked what is a good man? What does it mean to be good? He tells the story of the Good Samaritan, right? So instead of, and he ends the story with, and who do you think was good in this story? It's not truly this is who was good in this story. It's not simply insisting. It's critical thinking. It's like, here's the context, here's the poetry, now you do the philosophy. So yeah, that's what we're missing here. That's what we need from this holy book, as actual critical, like actual, not just repetition. Like honestly, not what's missing. This is what's bad about this book, is that it insists upon its own truthfulness so much more than it actually gives messages. Instead, like, so much time and effort, so many words are spent, and maybe that makes it easier to memorize and stuff, and maybe that's useful for how it was preserved for so long, even though it was oral tradition for a while. Like, even maybe this is useful at a certain point in time, but it's now unproductive, because it now undermines its ability for the reader to engage critically in this, because it's simply asserting the truthfulness of its own statement, and literally anyone can do that. And the only reason why everyone doesn't do that is because some people like critical thinking. And this is not critical thinking. This is the opposite. This is gullibility. The trustworthy spirit brought it down to your heart, prophet, so you could bring warning in clear Arabic tongue. This was foretold in the scriptures of earlier religions. Is it not proof? Like, well, if then you could have talked about how this was foretold. Like, none of the stories earlier foretell about the prophet bringing it down in clear Arabic, but these are things that are being said that was foretold. Why isn't that the point? Like, the omission here, there's so much you could have said that would have helped this, but isn't being said. The Qur'an is its own best critic. Is it not proof enough for them that the learned men of the children of Israel have recognized it? No, this is called an appeal to authority. Also, not very good critical thinking. Learned men, so what? Wise men have been wrong before. There are many wise men who disagree with each other. If we had sent it down to someone who was not an Arab, and he had recited it to them, they would still not have believed in it. But you didn't give this more convincing proof. You gave less convincing proof and said, well, they wouldn't have believed it anyway, so we didn't have to do the hard thing. We only did the easy thing, which could be explained by something else. But we only did that because they wouldn't have believed it anyway. It's like such a sneaky debate tactic. It's like, oh, well, actually, I didn't have to prove it to you because you wouldn't have believed me if I told you the proof. I was like, well, then what's the point of anything? What a rejection of reason. So we make it pass straight through the hearts of the guilty. They will not believe in it until they see the grievous torment, which will suddenly hit them when they are not expecting it. And then they will say, can we have more time? I give you my vow that whenever I meet God, and I've told you this before in other episodes, I will not be begging him for forgiveness. I will be demanding that he begs me for forgiveness, for having given us this world and having reached out, for having his followers use his name in vain, or use his name to justify their actions so many times. That is indeed something that God has to stand witness for. As the leader of men, as the guider of men, as the prophet who led people, that is his failure, and he should stand to answer for this failure, just as I am to stand to answer for my own faults, my own sins. So at least I can say this with some degree of certainty. I make my vow to you I will not ask for more time from God. When my time suddenly comes, as it must for us all, I've heard this phrase recently. It was, I hope for everyone that death comes suddenly, and that you have wish for more life, because that means you're living when you're still. If you die, if you come to a point in your life where you are okay with dying, then that is a very sad life to live. That is a very sad moment to be in your life, and I hope for all of you and for myself that we all have a little bit better lives than that. I hope for all of us that we do not expect it. How can they ask that our punishment be brought to them sooner? Think, if we let them enjoy life for some years and then promised them that then the promised torment came upon them, what good would their past enjoyment be to them? Never have we destroyed a town without sending down the messengers to warn it. As a reminder from us, we are never unjust. Actually, I did want to stop a little bit earlier, and I probably should. Why? So, how can they ask that our punishment be brought to them sooner? I would, like, you can try some other things, right? It's not like either you give me eternal torment right now, either you end my life right now and then I get to see God immediately and I'm like, oh shit, I was wrong, damn it, I'll have to try again. No, you don't get to, haha. No, it's not like, there are steps between vague speculations from 1,000 years ago, written down hundreds of years often after the events. Like there are ways to like give little hints and little proofs and like interact a little bit more. It's not like either you have the worst possible, like either we have the punishment or immediately, or we have like vague speculations by people saying obey me because I'm the will of God. Like surely you can imagine, like I'm not the only one who has enough imagination to see the possibilities here, right? I'm not the only one who can see the possibilities of everyday miracles, of prophets coming every generation, right? There are ways for God to interact with us more convincingly than he is doing without him suddenly deciding to end everything for us. Like, it's not an either or proposition. This is known as a false dichotomy. It's a very good example because like, the Quran has all of these great examples of logical fallacies. Like if you get good at criticizing the Quran, you get really good at being a critical thinker. But yeah, so think, if we had let them enjoy and the promised torment came, what would their past enjoyment be to them? It would be like, I think it's actually a worthwhile moment here to take a little bit of wisdom and be like, you should be happy that you have of good things in the past, even though all good things must end. Just because all good things must end doesn't mean that everything is valueless, right? It's kind of like when people look at like space and like the universe is huge, like enormous, and people, scientists, people like me, really nerds, go and say, "Oh, look, humanity is so insignificant. Doesn't this make you feel small?" And it's like, not really. We're not insignificant. Like, I'm the most significant person in my life. Like, I'm all of the things that have ever happened existed in this tiny little fragment of the universe, and that doesn't make any of it less important. Just because on the whole grand scale of things, it's not that, like, it's not big, that doesn't matter. And just because we haven't destroyed galaxies with our pollution doesn't mean that it's not important that we don't destroy our planet. Like, what we do is significant and important, just not even, and in the same way, like even if we ended all with torment, our past enjoyment was worth having. Our past enjoyment doesn't become less just because it ended, and just because it ended in torment. No, our past enjoyment is still valuable. That said, it does tie into an idea I've said earlier with this idea of infinity. Like an infinity of torment is always going to be disproportionate. in the same way an infinity of pleasure. Like, there's nothing which is so good that you've done in your life where you deserve permanent happiness forever. Like, for after 1 billion years, you've been rewarded enough, honestly. After 2, you're pushing it, right? And in the same way, the opposite is true. Like, there is no evil that deserves billions and billions of years of torment. Because it would be disproportionate. And in the same way, but in the same way, so maybe that's kind of the point here, is that everything, the finite pales in comparison to the infinite. Good as poetry. Never have we destroyed a town without sending down messengers to warn it. As a reminder from us, we are never unjust. So the idea being that it is just to punish us as long as you have warned us that you are going to do it. God makes us sin, but because he told us not to, then it's okay, right? Is not exactly moral. It was not the jinn who brought down this Qur'an, if you say so. It is neither in their interests nor in their power. If you say so, like, how is it not in their interests? Actually, let's deal with that. It's neither, like, it's in their power. Of course you don't believe that if, like, you're the Quran or you're a believer. Obviously you think the jinn don't have this power, but let's focus on this statement first, and not in their interests. Suppose that you had a jinn who wanted to influence and control people, who wanted to have more power than they deserved, more power than they could reasonably have. Would they not try and convince people that they are actually more powerful than they are, and that they are the true messengers of God? Would they not do that? Why wouldn't they do that? Of course they would do that. They would have their prophets, their messengers sent out and say, well, truly this is the word of God, so obey me. And I am clearly faithful, so obey me. Why? The jinn would have a definite interest in doing that, because that would increase their power. If the jinn could convince a person that the jinn is God, then the jinn then has the power to influence people more so they would than if they honestly represented themselves. So it is in their interest. And it can be easily shown to be in their interest by thinking about it a little bit. And maybe that's why this text doesn't actually explore it and doesn't defend it, because it's trivially true that it is in their interests. Unless, of course, you define the jinn as being opposed to the things you've said, then it's not in their interest because you've defined it as not in their interest. So only if you already believe that this is not in their interest can you accept that it is not in their interest. Like, this does not defend this idea that it is not the jinn. It does not explain it. It does not justify it. It does not prove it. Nothing that was said so far in the surah proves any of the things that the surah claims to prove. It simply asserts it. Indeed, they are prevented from overhearing it. Yeah, again, it's like overhearing it because it's being assumed. It's being presupposed that this is the word of God. And if you already accept that this is the word of God, then it's clearly not the word of not God, right? It's a tautology. The whole argument is a tautology. It's called circular reasoning. Yet another fallacy for our list. So, prophet, do not invoke any gods beside God, or you will incur punishment. Warn your nearest kinfolk, and lower your wing tenderly over the believers who follow you. If they disobey you, say, I bear no responsibility for your actions. Put your trust in the Almighty, the Merciful, who sees you when you stand up for prayer, and sees your movements among the worshippers. He is all-hearing, the all-knowing. Shall I tell you who the jinn come down to? They come down to every lying sinner. How do we know if someone is lying? Oh, like, how do we know if the jinn have come down to him? If I don't already believe in what they say. This is what the argument is so far. Who readily lends an ear to them. And most of them are liars. Only those who are lost in error I can't pronounce R's apparently, follow the poets. Skarar. That's how we do it in Norwegian. Sounds like I'm clearing my throat. Only those who are lost in error follow the poets. Error. So this idea here being that poet and liar are equivalent. It's like it does kind of connect with this idea I've had for a long time, is you can tell the truth by lying. I think that's what all storytelling is. That's what poetry is. That's the story of Little Red Riding Hood, the story of the three little pigs, even the story of the Good Samaritan. There doesn't have to have been a Good Samaritan for the truth of what makes a person good to be compassion, mercy, kindness, empathy, and the lack of bigotry. These are good values, even if there never was a Good Samaritan. And so, for me, this idea of liars and poets, you can tell the truth by lying. But let's go back to this idea I just voiced. Is like, well, how do we know if this came down from the jinn, or came down, like, how do we know if the people who wrote the book are inspired by liars or not? Well, we don't, except it insists that it's true. The only proof we ever get in the Quran, and I say this now, having still only read half of it, but it keeps happening. The only proof I have ever gotten is that it self-insists on its truth. And like, you literally could just write it on a piece of paper, like, this, what I say is the true word of God. And then you have as much proof as the Quran has. It's just, it says it many more times. Like, how many, like, if I write it really small, repeat it over and over, like, if I get Bart Simpson to write, this is the true word of God 1,000,000 times on the blackboard, does that make the blackboard the true word of God? No, of course not. But it does this sort of, they come down to every lying sinner, and because we know they're liars, because we know they're liars. It's a very tautology. Only those who are lost in error follow the poets. Not true. Poetry is an amazing guide for critical thinking, for exploring the truth, for understanding things that you do not yet understand, for understanding things that are too complicated to yet understand. So, very much reject that. Do you not see how they rove aimlessly in every valley? Well, I can't really contradict that. How they say what they do not do. Hypocrites. So poets and hypocrites are the same thing? Not so those poets who believe, do good deeds, and remember God often, and defend themselves after they have been wronged. Ooh. The evildoers will find out what they will return to. This kind of helps. I'm glad the translation does this. Not those poets, in parentheses, who believe. So there is a distinction being made, at least in my copy, or at least in the translation I'm reading, of a poet who believes and a poet who disbelieves. And that's an important distinction to make. Even though I think there's so much else that is problematic with this, at least it does this, and at least it does insist. But, as I predicted before I started reading, nothing was given that was not perfectly valid as interpreted as poetry. It's all just good poetry. And it's better if it's poetry than if it's not. But, yeah, I think that's a wrap, and I'm gonna continue again. Thank you all for watching. See you again for the next one.